Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I'm super excited to have Scott Ritzheimer on. And we were just kind of laughing, actually, because his last name, I love his last name, like Ritz Carlton. Okay. We were looking because a lot of people will butcher his name. And I've never had a problem with names, with last names. I don't know what it is, like languages and things like that have always been an easier thing for me. But anyway, I was so glad to have you on. There's some we'll learn a lot of cool things, I think, from Scott. And see the diversity of his background, and just his background really interests me. So anyway, welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So tell everybody anyway where you are right now in your leadership journey. What's going on?
Where am I now? So, where am I not? I've been all over the place. One of the things when I speak all over the country, and I always have to apologize because I look like I'm about 22 years old. But in the short career that I've had a wonderful opportunity of just a monumental amount of experience. And I can't take any credit for that. It's just, I happened into so many things, but I had to learn really, really quickly, experienced a lot of life in a relatively short career. And during my time before what I do now, I led and grew a company called Start Church. And we lived at the intersection of the church and faith-based world and business, because we were a for-profit business working with these faith-based leaders. And during that time, I had the opportunity to help start about 20,000 different organizations, churches, nonprofits, businesses, the whole thing. And just a dramatic exposure to leaders, particularly those entrepreneurial type leaders, really set the tone and tenor of what will be, I think, a really exciting and fun career. And in doing that, and something I'd imagine we'll dig into, learned a lot about leadership. I mean, I started out with that organization. We relaunched it when I was 20 years old. I just knew nothing about leadership. And so everything I did, unfortunately, I had to learn the hard way. We were very bad about going out and finding outside help. I read a lot, but in terms of bringing in coaches and bringing people alongside us who knew the way, who could help us on the path, we did not do that very well at all. And so ended up spending about 10 years feeling really alone, quite honestly, in leadership. I bought the lie that to be a CEO is to be alone. It's lonely on top. I thought that was just normal. And right around the time that I was thinking about what's next, what's the next, kind of season of my life, I came across a coach. His name's Robert Mallon. He's a dear friend of mine now. And he really opened up my world. And I realized for the first time in a very long time that to be alone takes a long time. And I recognized that in this next stage of my career, it wasn't about what I could build anymore. It was about who I could pour into. And so that's what I do. Now I coach both founders and business owners, and I also coach coaches and help them to coach others, because I've realized that coaching is essential, right? We're watching the Olympics now, and who's the first person and last person that every athlete sees? Up at the top is their coach saying, "Go get them." At the bottom, it's the coach saying, "Attaboy." But in the business world, we're not that fond of or likely to have a coach. Oftentimes, it's remedial. Like, we feel like we've screwed up if we need a coach. And because of that, we've had a lot of bad coaching relationships. And that was my experience. I thought it was an isolated incident, and it's happening all over the place. And so what I've really given myself to now, and where I'm pouring my heart and soul out, is helping leaders to find the right coach for them, and helping coaches to get rid of a lot of the distractions that really hold coaches back, so that they can be the coach that those founders and leaders need them to be.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I think that even as myself, I've only had a business coach. I had a coach many, many, many years ago. So I'm right now in the market, kind of looking for one that's specific to some needs I have. But and I don't look at it as a failure. So I'm like with you, I don't see it that way. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to kind of take this to the next level. My vision, it's short. It's short with just by myself. I have to be figuring out who else can help me see things differently. So but you're right. Not a lot of people see that. In my book, The Art of Caring Leadership, and just the work that I have done this last several years on leadership with heart, a big thing I talk about a lot is self-leadership and self-care and congruency and authenticity and having a support network and just all of those things as it relates to self-leadership. So this component you talk about is really critical, because often, for those who listen in on this often, we think like, we've got to put like our shield on and our coat and our bat cape and we have to like leap tall mountain. right? Just to kind of to really show a lot of strength to our people. And sometimes it's not that. And sometimes it is. We just can't do it all alone. So
Yeah.
I appreciate this concept a lot.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about, I always like to ask folks, where does their drive to lead come from? Especially since your desire to do this and enter into this space started so young. Where did that drive to lead come from?
So it's an interesting story, and to kind of, one, show how much of a nerd I am, and two, to kind of lay some background behind it. I'll tell the story. But so I'm leading this company. We talked about Start Church. It's growing really well. Revenue's great. But what's happening that no one really knows behind the surface is that we're making less and less profit every year. It looks like everything's great. We're hiring people, revenue's going up, but we're making less and less. Our profit margins are falling, and we cannot stop it. There's nothing that we try. We read the books, we do the thing, right? We even hired some people to come in and help. They actually made it worse. And so I'm at this really, really crucial stage where it's just like, I feel alone. I don't know what to do. And I was listening to a podcast like this, actually. And a gentleman got on. His name's Les McEwen. He's now a business partner of mine. But he got on and he talked about these 7 stages that businesses go through. And we won't get into the stages, but the one that matters is the 3rd stage. Is called whitewater. And that's what was causing the problems in my business, was the stage that all successful organizations go through. But everyone who goes through it feels like they're completely singled out, right? It feels like this is just happening to us. We're just screwing this up. What is wrong with us? And it's normal. It's something that we all go through. And so right afterwards, I went and I bought the audiobook. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. And one more piece of backstory is my wife is from Norway. And so we have made a habit. She said, if we're going to get married, you're going to take me to Norway every year. Like, it was prerequisite, as we were starting off. And so we've been to Norway just about every year. And what we've started doing once we had kids was we would go and we'd kind of leave the kids with the in-laws, my in-laws, her parents, and then we'd travel somewhere across Europe on wherever we could find cheap flights. And I'm a big fan of Formula One racing. And so it just happened that we were in Europe when the Formula One event was happening in Monaco, which is like the creme de la creme of Formula One racing. Very fast cars going through very narrow streets and past very big yachts. It's just a really
Yes,
cool
I've been there. Yeah.
experience. And so I'm off to this romantic weekend getaway with my wife to watch these amazing cars go through this beautiful place. And what am I doing on the plane flying over France? I'm listening to a business audiobook on life cycle stages. And during that time, again, just to show you how big a nerd I am, but going through that time, like, we had to figure it out, right? It was that important too. And so he starts describing this stage called whitewater, and I finally, for the very first time, feel like someone understands where we're at. We're in whitewater. And so that was the first thought. And that was just a huge relief. And now I get to see people have that again and again and again. It's a profound thing. But the very next thought was a little stranger. And it was, if I could help people get out of whitewater every day for the rest of my life, I would die a happy man. And that was really the first seed of what is now this new endeavor of helping people to do much faster, what took me an extended period of time to do. And that's when I really started to understand what I love and adore, especially from a leadership standpoint, is working on businesses. I don't particularly care for like what the product is. It's like, I'm not passionate about, this sounds kind of bad. I wasn't passionate about planting churches. I loved what we did, but it wasn't really what floated my boat. What I loved was building the thing that could do that. And that's why it worked so exceptionally well. That's why we were able to create something. And I recognized that if I could spend more and more of my time working on the organizations, right, I would be hitting that place in my heart that I love so much more. And so that was really the genesis of it. Was I finally found something that explained where we were, and I had to share it.
Wow, it's crazy. Thinking about again, you were so young to start that. So I mean, does the seed go back even further? Like, were your parents entrepreneurs? Did you start a business when you were younger? Like, I'm just curious to know if it goes back even further than that.
Yeah. So
The leadership.
it took me a very long time to recognize it. Even when we like relaunched this business, I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur. It's just I'm thick-headed. That's all I can come up with. But I was not the guy who was like the quintessential go sell candy in the schoolyard. Like that wasn't me. but I started my own landscaping company, and worked for a doctor's office, I think when I was 13, something like that. I talked my dad into, when we were building our house, I talked him into paying me to install insulation in the house, and bought myself a motorcycle with it, or a dirt bike. And so like when I go back and
Nice.
look at it, I had an opportunity to do anything I wanted for a project at school. And I decided I was going to follow stocks for 3 months and report on that. I didn't know anything about that, but so it was there all along.
Mm,
But what happened was, and the reason I didn't see it for so long is because I was always around highly entrepreneurial people. And so my dad is an entrepreneur. He started
mm,
his own business around the time that I was really coming of age. And I had the opportunity of working directly with some small business owners when I was in school, and then coming right out of school. And even with Start Church, I paired up with this just phenomenal, quintessential entrepreneur, Raul Rivera. And so because of that, I always felt like I was kind of proximate to entrepreneurs, but I wasn't the entrepreneur myself. And looking back on it now, it's like, well, of course you were, you know what I mean? And so,
you're
as
an entrepreneur
surprising
in
as that
development.
is, yeah, I was a CEO before I was an entrepreneur, which is a funny thing to say. It's not the truth, but that's how I felt.
Mm. Okay, so how do you keep it all in the air? I mean, people ask me that, like, how do you do so much? Like, how do you do this, that, that? Well, I have a team,
Yes.
and I start with me first. So
Yes.
I'm curious to know, how do you keep it all in the air with just
Yeah,
everything
it's
else?
an interesting transition to go from leading an organization with 75 people to go, actually right around the time that COVID started is when I did this full time. And so I went from leading a team of 75 to leading myself, and only myself. And so it's like, hey, this needs to get done. Oh, shoot. And
Oh.
one of the questions that you had posted in an email earlier was, how was 2020 challenging? And for me, the biggest challenge was going through a crisis and not having a team to lead. That was really, really difficult for me. And so I've got the opportunity now where I've got a lot of folks that I'm working with. We've got 17, I believe, scale architects now. I get to work really closely with Les McEwen, guy who just revolutionized my view of the business world, and then another gentleman, Andrew Wallace. And then I've got some folks on my team, my wife, and a dear friend of ours, Suzanne, who helped me. And so while it's a small operation, there's so many hands and contributions happening. And so, how do you keep it all in the air? I could have given you an answer when I was leading the bigger organization. I had it all figured out. Now that I'm flying solo,
Yeah.
more often than not, I have
Yes.
no idea.
I
It's
know.
just, it's taking it around. Like all of my like great ideas on how to structure days and everything are out the window. And I've actually been leaning into a much more opportunistic approach to each day, and to how I approach the business as a whole. And there has been so much joy in that, actually. There's a time for structure and regimen and routine, and there's also a time I'm finding of putting that to the side a little bit and just exploring and
Mm,
experiencing. And so a big part of what I'm doing now is just exploring, and some of that is recognizing when to say no to things. Some More often than not, it's saying yes, and then it's the next no, right? There's the initial yes,
yes.
try it out, but you got to get good at killing things that are not the right thing to continue pursuing. And in doing that, you're right. I mean, you have to have a team around you, even if you're a solopreneur, which in many ways I am. I've still got a whole host of people that are around me and supporting me.
I know. So that going back to that, in a crisis and not having anybody to lead. Oh my gosh, I so know how that feels. I was working in an organization, and I had a team to start. So they hired me. I came in. I was leading a team. Then they did a one reorg that took that team away. Another reorg that completely changed my job, like trajectory. Which, by the way, it was a good change because it ended up putting me in the place I'm at now. But that first one was like, because the reorgs were causing everybody to be up. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't have anybody to like uplift, or I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like that were directly on my team. So it was like the North Star thing. It
Yeah.
really did feel strange, not to have that. It
Yeah.
was very odd. And then I love that the idea of being the solopreneur, and then having the team, but not having, like, having an extended team is the thing. I lean so much on the extended team that I have, that I don't even know what the heck I would do without them, because I can't work. I mean, like, I'm not a person who can just work by myself predominantly.
Yeah.
So I'm like you, I'm a speaker, author, all those things too, but
Yeah.
it's just aside from that, it's
Yeah.
hard to really do stuff on my own. So
Yeah, and fundamentally, kind of structurally, so that's a little bit where I'm at. Now I say that, and there's always, a layer of structure underneath it. So one of the things that I found, particularly about coaches, and the reason why 8 out of 10 of them fail. Now this is true of most professional fields, actually. I just happen to work with coaches and consultants. But what we tend to do early on is we say yes to we say that initial yes, but we do it way too often, right? And we do it to clients. That's where it becomes a real big problem. So in the coaching world, what does it look like? A friend calls and they're like, hey, such and such told me you were into coaching. I'm having trouble with my P&L. I'm not sure how to read it or what to do with it. Can you help me with that? Yes. And then the next person calls and like, hey, I heard you were coaching, and I was wondering if you could help me with some of my consulting and sales materials, right? It's nothing to do with P&Ls, but I was an entrepreneur. I did sales materials. So yes, I can do that. And, the next person calls and like, hey, we're having trouble with this one leader. Can you help them? And so now you're doing P&L on one call, you're switching to sales and marketing on the next call. And then you're going to, whatever else it is. And us business coaches in particular do that. But again, it happens across all kinds of different professions. And what ends up happening is we overcommit because we underestimate the amount of time it takes off call to prepare for that. And so we end up being kind of a jack of all trades, or trying to be, but we're a master of none. And it seems like the right thing in the moment. It seems like if I don't say yes, I'm not going to have the money to put food on the table next week. But in fact, it's the very thing that will cause you to get stuck is saying yes to everything. And the best cure for that, one, is niching down, and there's some right ways and wrong ways to do that. But what that allows you to do, and the biggest thing that I've found to help me, is leaning into a structured process. And so even though I'm doing all these different things and for all these different people, I'm using one single process to do all of that. I'm walking everybody through one structured program, and I didn't even find it. I didn't even create it. It's just the one that we found and used, in my time at Start Church. That's the one I now teach and use for both my clients and my coaches. And that structured process, it was the difference maker. When I first kicked off, I was like, I can do everything. I'm awesome. And then I realized, no, this is exhausting. I can do one thing. I can do it really, really well. And it may look like a lot of things from the outside, but it's actually the same thing over and over and over again from the inside.
So now I'm curious to know, this is kind of like a part of the show, like everybody has to do it. So you have to share a story about a time when maybe obviously Start Churches, or just any time where you feel like maybe you weren't that leader, you weren't a leader with heart, because I know that you're a Christian leader, but maybe like you were like, I'm not really acting like that right now. What did that look like specifically in that story? And then what did you do to come out of it?
I've been thinking about it, and going way back, I've done it a lot. It's actually been, I can be accused of being a robot. So leading with heart is something that's a skill that I've had to learn and develop over time. And I've spent a lot of energy on it. I remember one time it was really profound because I had this stark contrast between the way I was leading and the way that this really remarkable man was leading. And so what happened was we were growing as an organization, and I was inviting people into a leadership team that did not exist before. And so we had a dinner planned. We took everybody out. It's this nice thing. And I did this like really, I don't even know what I said, but it was this really weird presentation that made everyone feel like they were being punished, not promoted, and it was like, because it was all like the practical nuts and bolts and like, has to be this, has to be that. And in fact, what I was trying to say, which was right in line with leading with heart, was I wanted servant leaders on the team. Right. I didn't want folks to come in and just kind of drive, by privilege, was what I was trying to say. But I didn't serve my team in the process of doing that. And so I ended up confusing them. And it was just, I had made that meeting all about me. I was so concerned about whether or not I'd say the right things that I really didn't pay any attention to whether or not it was actually helping them. And so about a week later, I had an opportunity to go to an event held by another company where friends of mine were leading. And they invited in Dan Cathy from Chick-fil-A. And he walked up on stage and he had his suit and his tie and his shirt and everything. And like he had every opportunity to speak from his position, right? And to speak from what he felt comfortable doing. And one of the very first things he did when he walked on stage, because it was a younger group of people that he was talking to, is he took his tie off, he took his jacket off, laid it on his chair, and he untucked his shirt actually, and just kind of disheveled himself a little bit. And it was like, I mean, he didn't physically step down into the audience because he was up on a stage and we could still see him, but it was like he stepped down into the audience and then had one of the most heart-to-heart conversations I had ever had. The organization was going through some crisis at the time, and it was one of the few coaching or speaking events that he actually took on around then because of this crisis that was happening. And it was so genuine and it was so from the heart. And it stood in such stark contrast to this meeting that I had just done with my team, which arguably should have been easier, that it really set me on a path of understanding how can he do that as a communicator, right? How can he do that? As a leader, how can he do that? And one of the tools that I found really helpful for me in doing that is different style profiles, right? So things like Myers-Briggs, or more recently Enneagram or DISC, or the one that we use is called the Synergist model. But using those different profiles has made it really helpful for me to understand, okay, here's what you do and what your strengths are, but here's how other people are wired. And it's normal. It's not a character flaw. And so those different profiles have helped me in one-on-one conversations, right? I can understand you, the way that you're speaking, and I can speak your language as a leader. And two, even from the stage, I recognize that I have to be speaking through each of those different languages so that my whole audience can hear me. And so that's been a really profound journey. And it started with that really, really bad presentation that I gave, in contrast with an excellent one from Mr. Kathy.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Oh yeah, and I have such admiration just for that company period. So that you say, the fact that you say that means a lot. Um, I've always, interesting enough, as we talk about kind of styles, I always look from a distance at people who were super duper confident and maybe even a little cocky and even like borderline arrogant. But I was always like, oh, they're kind of a jerk. But I had this little piece of me that was like, I wish I could kind of be more like that. Because I'm not. I'm like I'm like the relatable queen. And so whatever I do, doesn't matter what it is. People really, I don't, it's, I want to be leaning in. So I want to be coming to you, connecting to you. But there's this piece of me where I see people saying, yeah, and I'm this, and I just go, I kind of like, it's kind of irritating, but at the same time, like, I kind of like it. Like, I kind of wish I could do that. Isn't that funny how we just, as we look into things that we either admire or things that we don't or whatever. So it's just funny. And then with him, you seeing that in him, it's, and helping to really change your view of how to show up for people that are looking to you for guidance is key. And I think that's a big part of what caring leadership's about. It's so much internal work. We have to do so much internal work on ourselves to show up right. I always tell people, somebody, and it was not my idea, but someone gave me this metaphor of a teacup and a saucer, and how much we need to pour into the teacup so that it overflows into the saucer. And then we as leaders give from the overflow, not from inside the cup. So I use it a lot in a lot of my talks because it's a good visual for people to be thinking like, how much am I draining inside the cup and not giving from the overflow, so that then I show up parched, tired, dry for the people that are looking to me for guidance. And so this, what you talk about is, I see this better way. I'm going to skill myself up to be better every day, not perfect, but better, at 1% better kind of idea, right? And so I think that's, you're on to something. And I think that's what I want people to be thinking about, is how can you just be a little bit every day. Having said that, it's not that there's something wrong with us. But kind of like what you alluded to, is like, we all have different styles, we all have different preferences. So it's not that there's something wrong. It's just that it's always good to just try to tweak, and particularly because we have to interact with other humans every day. So how do we come closer to them?
Yeah. And it's not, the way that I always describe it is, it's not to deny yourself, right? It's not about boosting up all of your weaknesses, because that there's some shoring up that has to happen. But beyond that, what it is, it's about making your strength more accessible to the people you work with. That's really what it's about. It's about being more of you in a more accessible way. And that takes learning some skills and things, but it doesn't change who you are, right? We do a lot of work around these leadership styles and a lot of work around developing your leadership, but we're never trying to change who people are, right? If you're like what we would call a processor style leader, right? You're very systematic, you're even risk averse. Our goal is not to make you a visionary, right?
Yeah.
That would be to deny who you are. It would be to deny the very strength, the essential skills that you bring to a team. And so what we always try and do is round off those rough edges, right?
Hmm.
How do you
Yep.
round off the rough edges of your natural style so that you can bring that to the other styles as a strength and not a liability?
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so now it's time for you to turn the table. So you get to ask me a question. What question do you have for me?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because what I've found is that this kind of leading with a heart thing, especially in some circles, is really taking root. But the question that I have is there a point where leading with heart goes too far, or put better, is there a point when it's used as an excuse to back down rather than a call to stand up?
Hmm, that's thank you for that. Oh, great question. So, the key there is people often think leadership with heart or caring leadership is squishy, that it's nebulous, that it doesn't have guardrails. But that's not the truth. In fact, caring leadership means that we are clear with our expectations, that we do provide some guardrails for people so they understand what their parameters are. We just happen to be more flexible in our thinking about the how long the runway is and how much freedom they get to go run down it. But in the end, we have to hold people accountable. So, like, helping people course correct out of love and care is in fact caring leadership. I know it because I wrote the book on it and I speak on it and I have done it. Now, have I failed? Absolutely, sure have. I have not. I have gone off the track. I have not always done it well. I've had to go back and apologize to team members for it. But in the end, me having to sit down, my very best relationships at work were the ones where I had to sit down with someone after I've already built years of trust with them to say, listen, I'm super concerned about either this performance or your behavior or your communication with this person. And I want to know what was that about? I want to get to the bottom of that. And how can I help you get to a better place and move past where you're at right now? Because this is just not the best part of you. I can have that conversation though, because I've already built those years of trust. And
Right.
I've given that kind of the positive dividends first so that I can kind of remove some of that from the bacon cow when I need to.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
so
think
good.
that caring leadership has so much to do with clarifying expectations, holding
Right.
people accountable, giving them some parameters, because if you don't, they kind of are flailing.
Yeah.
They don't know what the heck to do
Yeah.
and they don't know what your expectations are. So now you're failing in that regard.
Yeah.
So that was great, Scott. Yeah, a lot of people don't. They totally confuse that. Go download on Audible, The Art of Caring Leadership, Scott.
I love it. Doing it.
Okay, so for those who are listening, what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave them with as they think about their leadership journey and maybe some of the struggles they're on, what's happened this last couple of years, where we're going for this year and the next. What might be a couple pearls of wisdom you might leave them with?
I think the biggest thing, and you've hit on this already, is you got to know yourself, right? First, right? If you are not self-aware, then you're just going to struggle to make any progress beyond that. And so that's where, again, for me, there are lots of tools out there that I found are really helpful. Things like our Synergist leadership quiz, or any of them. I use them all. I find them all very helpful. But use some of those tools that exist outside of yourself to help understand yourself better. But don't stop there. Oftentimes we get them and we almost weaponize them. Like, I am a visionary, and so I'm going to fly my visionary freak flag, and you just have to deal with it, right? And that's great. That's actually step one. That's more helpful than not knowing what's going on at all in the first place. But it's only step one. Step two, and really the longer part of the journey, is understanding all of the other styles. So if you pick one of those systems, you read about your style, that's great. Now go read about the other ones and start learning to speak in their language. And that's where teamwork really starts to flourish. Before you really get to that point where you can speak each other's language, you may be working together as a group, but it's very difficult to work together as a team. And that's what in our world we call being more synergistic as a leader, bringing your strength, but filtering it through the language of your audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, that's great. Thank you. The synergy idea, understanding who we are, assessments. We believe in that. A huge in Employee Fanatics. We have the Caring Leadership Self-Assessment. We are DISC certified. We are ESKI certified. So assessments are like, yeah, that's how we get to the bottom. That's kind of like, let's get the dot and put it right, the pin on that little dot, and then let's work on that. That's what I
Yeah,
love about assessment. So
it's awesome.
the fact that you bring that to the forefront, I think is really intelligent. So, okay, for those who are listening right now, if you found a great value in my conversation with Scott and you really feel like you took a lot of nuggets away, please make sure you share this episode far and wide, because this is how we grow as leaders and other people get access to it. And also, don't forget to go write that 5-star review on Amazon or Amazon, Apple Podcast, or wherever else you might listen to the podcast, because it's on so many platforms. But go and write that review, because that's how more people get access again, and it moves up the algorithm. If you think about it, I think right now we're like in the top 100 for the leadership and management podcasts, and that's a good thing, right? But we can't do that unless you continue to do the reviews and to share it. So Scott, thank you so much for being on here and just imparting such amazing stories and knowledge on the listeners today. Appreciate
Heather,
you.
thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.